Hello and welcome to Chapter 2 of The Phantom Tollbooth. Let's get right to it. Head to Chapter 2, and you'll see that Chapter 2 is called Beyond Expectations. Now, what I would like you to do is go back up to the map, which I'm going to show here. And if you look on this side of the map, you'll see coming from the toll booth and going to the toll booth. Look at the building with the flags on top right next to it, and you'll see that that place is called Expectations. So that's the first place that Milo is going to go on his journey into the lands beyond. And I'd like to start off by talking about that word expectations because it is one of your vocabulary words. An expectation is something that you believe is going to happen. It's something that you're looking forward to happening. And if you think about it, before you do anything or go anywhere, you first have an expectation of what it's going to be like when you do it or when you get there. Right? So for example, I took Vero on a walk today, and as I was getting him all ready, I had an expectation of what that walk was going to be like and where I was going to go on my route. And then the thing about expectations, though, is in life, what we expect doesn't always happen. Right? Sometimes we expect something to be one way and it turns out completely different. Or we expect a movie to be good and the movie turns out bad. Or we expect a song to be bad and it turns out we actually liked it. Or we thought the novel was going to be boring. We expected it to be boring, but it turns out it was actually super interesting. So, expectations. Let's go back to Chapter 2. And I will start reading. Remember that you should be reading along with me and also watching this video at the same time for important study notes. And this time I will definitely be telling you specific things that will be on the quiz for you to make a note of. Chapter 2, Beyond Expectations. Suddenly, he found himself speeding along an unfamiliar country highway, and as he looked back over his shoulder, neither the toll booth nor his room, nor even the house, was anywhere in sight. What had started as make-believe was now very real. What a strange thing to have happen, he thought, just as you might be thinking right now. This game is much more serious than I thought. For here I am riding on a road I've never seen, going to a place I've never heard of, and all because of a toll booth which came from nowhere. I'm certainly glad that it's a nice day for a trip, he concluded hopefully, for at the moment this was the one thing he definitely knew. The sun sparkled, the sky was clear, and all the colors he saw seemed to be richer and brighter than he could ever remember. The flowers shone as if they'd been cleaned and polished, and the tall trees that lined the road shimmered in silvery green. "Welcome to Expectations," said a carefully lettered sign on a small house at the side of the road. "Information, predictions, and advice cheerfully offered. Park here and blow horn." With the first sound of the horn, a little man in a long coat came rushing from the house, speaking as fast as he could and repeating everything several times. My, welcome, 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 welcome to the land of expectations, to the land of expectations, to the land of expectations. We don't get many travelers these days. We certainly don't get many travelers these days. Now, what can I do for you? I'm the weatherman. "Is this the right road for Dictionopolis?" asked Milo, a little bowled over by the effusive greeting. Well now, well now, well now, he began again. I don't know of any wrong road to Dictionopolis, so if this road goes to Dictionopolis at all, it must be the right road, and if it doesn't, it must be the right road to somewhere else, because there are no wrong roads to anywhere. Do you think it will rain? I thought you were the weather man, said Milo, very confused. Oh, no, said the little man. I'm the weather man, not the weather man. For, after all, it's more important to know whether there will be weather than what the weather will be. And with that, he released a dozen balloons that sailed off into the sky. Must see which way the wind is blowing, he said, chuckling over his little joke and watching them disappear in all directions. Let's take a pause there because there are a couple things to talk about. The line we just read, must see which way the wind is blowing. Well, that's an idiom. It's an idiom that you don't need to know for the quiz, but when you say, I need to see which way the wind is blowing, it means I'm trying to see which way things are going, how I think it's going to go. Going back to the weatherman, this will be on the quiz. And you'll notice we have another homophone. We have weather and weather. Now this guy is not the weatherman. He's not W-E-A-T-H-E-R. He's not somebody who tells the weather. He's the weatherman. W-H-E-T-H-E-R. And so that's the joke. And on the quiz, when you are answering who Milo meets in the land of expectations, you need to spell his name correctly. You need to spell the right weather. He's the weatherman, W-H-E-T-H-E-R. And finally, the land of expectations. So I want you to go back to what we said in the novel study overview of how this novel will take an idiom or an idea that is figurative and make it literal. So we talked at the beginning of this video how you can have an expectation about something that's going to happen. Well, that's not something real, but in the book, it's a real place, a place that you have to go to before you go anywhere else, because you have to first expect something before you go on to do it. Okay, let's continue. What kind of place is expectations? Inquired Milo, unable to see the humor and feeling very doubtful of the little man's sanity. Good question, he exclaimed. Expectations is the place that you must always go to before you get to where you're going. Of course, some people never go beyond expectations, but my job is to hurry them along whether they like it or not. Now, what else can I do for you? And before Milo could reply, he rushed into the house and reappeared a moment later with a new coat and an umbrella. Let's take another pause and look at the idiom in that paragraph, beyond expectations. That's an idiom you will need to know for the quiz. When you say that somebody is going beyond expectations, it means they're doing more or better than you expected. So if I went to see a Star Wars movie and I thought, that Star Wars movie is going to be probably all right, but not that great, and then I sat down and the movie turned out to be awesome, I would say, wow, that movie really went beyond my expectations. I think I can find my own way, said Milo, not at all sure that he could. But since he didn't understand the little man at all, he decided that he might as well move on, at least until he met someone whose sentences didn't always sound as if they would make as much sense backwards as forwards. Splendid, 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 exclaimed the weatherman. Whether or not you find your own way, you're bound to find some way. If you happen to find my way, please return it, as it was lost years ago. I imagine by now it's quite rusty. You did say it was going to rain, didn't you? And with that, he opened the umbrella and walked with Milo to the car. I'm glad you made your own decision. I do so hate to make up my mind about anything, whether it's good or bad, up or down, in or out, rain or shine. Expect everything, I always say, and the unexpected never happens. Now, please drive carefully. Goodbye, 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 good. His last goodbye was drowned out by an enormous clap of thunder, and as Milo drove down the road in the bright sunshine, he could see the weatherman standing in the middle of a fierce cloudburst that seemed to be raining only on him. So now we know the joke about the weatherman is he's the WHETHER man, the weatherman, and then he's affected by the weather because it's raining only on him. Let's continue. We are leaving the land of expectations. The road dipped now into a broad green valley and stretched toward the horizon. The little car bounced along with very little effort, and Milo had hardly to touch the accelerator to go as fast as he wanted. He was glad to be on his way again. It's all very well to spend time in expectations, he thought, but talking to that strange man all day would certainly get me nowhere. He's the most peculiar person I've ever met, continued Milo, unaware of how many peculiar people he would shortly encounter. As he drove along the peaceful highway, he soon fell to daydreaming and paid less and less attention to where he was going. In a short time, he wasn't paying any attention at all, and that is why, at a fork in the road, when a sign pointed to the left, Milo went to the right, along a route which looked suspiciously like the wrong way. Now, I hope that you're paying attention, because that paragraph that you just read is important and you need to know it for the quiz. It's important details. When we ask how Milo got onto the wrong route, when I ask you that on the quiz, you need to say that he wasn't paying attention, and you need to remember that when he came to a fork in the road, a sign pointed to the left, but he wasn't paying attention, so he went to the right. Those are the details I want you to remember for the quiz. Let's continue. Things began to change as soon as he left the main highway. The sky became quite gray, and, along with it, the whole countryside seemed to lose its color and assume the same monotonous tone. I'd like to pause on the word monotonous. Monotonous is something that is boring or that repeats over and over again, like homework or grading. Everything was quiet, and even the air hung heavily. The birds sang only gray songs, and the road wound back and forth in an endless series of climbing curves. Mile after mile after mile after mile he drove, and now, gradually, the car went slower and slower until it was hardly moving at all. It looks as though I'm getting nowhere, yawned Milo, becoming very drowsy and dull. I hope I haven't taken a wrong turn. Mile after mile after mile after mile, and everything became grayer and more monotonous. Finally, the car just stopped altogether, and, hard as he tried, it wouldn't budge another inch. I wonder where I am, said Milo in a very worried tone. You're in the Doldrums, wailed a voice that sounded far away. He looked around quickly to see who had spoken. No one was there, and it was as quiet and still as one could imagine. Yes, the Doldrums, yawned another voice, but still he saw no one. What are the Doldrums? He cried loudly, and tried very hard to see who would answer this time. The Doldrums, my young friend, are where nothing ever happens and nothing ever changes. This time, the voice came from so close that Milo jumped with surprise, for, sitting on his right shoulder, so lightly that he hardly noticed, was a small creature exactly the color of his shirt. "Allow me to introduce all of us," the creature went on. "We are the Lethargarians, at your service." Okay, let's look at that word, lethargarian. We're going to do a little etymology. The word lethargy, and that should be a clue then of what kind of creatures are called lethargarians. They are lazy creatures. You also need to know this for the quiz. You need to be able to tell me that the lethargarians come from the word lethargy, which means lazy. Milo looked around and, for the first time, noticed dozens of them, sitting on the car, standing in the road, and lying all over the trees and bushes. They were very difficult to see because whatever they happened to be sitting on or near was exactly the color they happened to be. Each one looked very much like the other, except for the color, of course, and some looked even more like each other than they did like themselves. "I'm very pleased to meet you," said Milo, not sure whether or not he was pleased at all. "I think I'm lost. Can you help me, please?" "Don't say think," said one sitting on his shoe, for the one on his shoulder had fallen asleep. "It's against the law." And he yawned and fell off to sleep too. "No one's allowed to think in the Doldrums," continued a third, beginning to doze off. And as each one spoke, he fell off to sleep, and another picked up the conversation with hardly any interruption. So try to picture that. One Lethargarian speaks, falls asleep, and the other one just continues right on as if it's one long conversation, and they each fall asleep and the next one picks it up. "Don't you have a rule book? It's Local Ordinance 175389-J. Look at the word ordinance. That is one of your vocabulary words. An ordinance is a rule or a law, usually an official rule or law. Milo quickly pulled the rule book from his pocket. Did you remember that he had a rule book that came with the package? Opened to the page and read Ordinance 175389-J. "It shall be unlawful, illegal, and unethical to think of thinking, surmise, presume, reason, meditate, or speculate while in the doldrums. Anyone breaking this law shall be severely punished." So notice that thinking, surmise, presume, reason, meditate, and speculate, they all mean the same things, right? Those are all different kinds of thinking. When you surmise, it means you create a solution. Presume means to assume. To reason is to think things through. To meditate is a form of thinking. And of course, speculation is when you're using your imagination to think. So it is against the law to think in the doldrums. And you have to think, is that funny? Because how can you not think? You remember my joke? If you weren't thinking, you'd be dead. Well, let's continue. "That's a ridiculous law," said Milo quite indignantly. "Everybody thinks." "We don't," shouted the Lethargarians all at once. "And most of the time, you don't," said a yellow one sitting in a daffodil. "That's why you're here. You weren't thinking, and you weren't paying attention either. People who don't pay attention often get stuck in the doldrums." And with that, he toppled out of the flower and fell snoring into the grass. Take a pause. In the doldrums is an idiom. It's a very commonly used idiom. If you say to somebody, "Oh, I'm in the doldrums today," it basically means that you are bored, you don't care, you might be depressed, you might be lazy, you might be daydreaming, you're just in a sort of down mood where you can't think very clearly. We say you're in the doldrums. And this is the wonderful thing about idioms is idioms have origin stories. So here's the quick origin story of where in the doldrums actually comes from. It's a sailing term, right? So before motorized boats, you'd have sailors and they need the wind to move the boats, to push the boats. The wind has to push the sails. Well, there was a certain part of the ocean, I think near the equator, and there was no wind there in this one area. So that ships that would get caught in this area, which was called the doldrums, there would be no wind to push the boats and they would get stuck there. And so people used to say, oh, that ship is stuck in the doldrums. And then it came to mean just being stuck somewhere, stuck in a bad mood. That is an important idiom that you need to know for the quiz. And this is the beauty of the Phantom Tollbooth. You say to somebody, I'm stuck in the doldrums. Well, in the book, the doldrums is an actual real place that Milo goes to because he wasn't paying attention. All right, let's continue. Milo couldn't help laughing at the little creature's strange behavior, even though he knew it might be rude. Stop that at once, ordered the plaid one, clinging to his stocking. Laughing is against the law. Don't you have a rule book? It's Local Ordinance 574381-W. Opening the book again, Milo found Ordinance 574381-W. In the doldrums, laughter is frowned upon, and smiling is permitted only on alternate Thursdays. Violators shall be dealt with most harshly. Well, if you can't laugh or think, what can you do? Asked Milo. Anything as long as it's nothing, and everything as long as it isn't anything, explained another. There's lots to do. We have a very busy schedule. At 8 o'clock we get up, and then we spend from 8 to 9 daydreaming. From 9 to 9:30 we take our early mid-morning nap. From 9:30 to 10:30 we dawdle and delay. Dawdle means to waste time. From 10:30 to 11:30 we take our late early morning nap. From 11 o'clock to 12 o'clock we bide our time and then eat lunch. From 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock we linger and loiter. Now I'd like to hang on to those two words. Linger and loiter basically mean kind of the same thing. They mean to hang around longer than you should. From 2 o'clock to 2:30 we take our early afternoon nap. From 2:30 to 3:30 we put off for tomorrow what we could have done today. From 3:30 to 4 o'clock we take our early late afternoon nap. From 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock we loaf and lounge until dinner. From 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock we dilly-dally. From 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock we take our early evening nap, and then for an hour before we go to bed at 9 o'clock we waste time. And that's the joke here, right? Is that all of the things that he lists that they do, dawdle, delay, lounge and loaf and dilly-dally, linger and loiter, those are all different ways of saying that they waste time doing nothing. As you can see, that leaves almost no time for brooding, lagging, plotting, or procrastinating. And if we stopped to think or laugh, we'd never get nothing done. You mean you'd never get anything done, corrected Milo. We don't want to get anything done, snapped another angrily. We want to get nothing done, and we can do that without your help. I hope you know that it's grammatically incorrect to say we'd never get nothing done, right? That's why Milo corrected him, because what he said was grammatically incorrect. You see, continued another in a more conciliatory tone, that's more of an apologetic tone, it's really quite strenuous doing nothing all day. Strenuous means it's a lot of work. It's really quite strenuous doing nothing all day. So once a week we take a holiday and go nowhere, which was just where we were going when you came along. Would you care to join us? I might as well, thought Milo. That's where I seem to be going anyway. Tell me, he yawned, for he felt ready for a nap now himself. Does everyone here do nothing? Everyone but the terrible Watchdog, said two of them, shuddering in chorus. He's always sniffing around to see that nobody wastes time. A most unpleasant character. The Watchdog? Said Milo quizzically. The Watchdog! Shouted another, fainting from fright, for, racing down the road, barking furiously and kicking up a great cloud of dust, was the very dog of whom they had been speaking. And I think you know from the cover that this will be one of the other main characters of the book, so pay attention. Run! Wake up! Run! Here he comes! The Watchdog! Great shouts filled the air as the Lethargarians scattered in all directions and soon disappeared entirely. Exclaimed the Watchdog as he dashed up to the car, loudly puffing and panting. Milo's eyes opened wide, for there in front of him was a large dog with a perfectly normal head, 4 feet, and a tail, and the body of a loudly ticking alarm clock. What are you doing here? Growled the Watchdog. Just killing time, replied Milo apologetically. You see, killing time? Roared the dog, so furiously that his alarm went off. It's bad enough wasting time without killing it. And he shuddered at the thought. Why are you in the Doldrums anyway? Don't you have anywhere to go? Let's take a pause. Killing time is an idiom, right? You're not actually murdering time. It just means wasting time. And this Watchdog does not like anybody wasting time or killing time. I was on my way to Dictionopolis when I got stuck here, explained Milo. Can you help me? Help you? You must help yourself, the dog replied, carefully winding himself with his left hind leg. I suppose you know why you got stuck? I guess I just wasn't thinking, said Milo. Precisely, shouted the dog as his alarm went off again. Now you know what you must do. I'm afraid I don't, admitted Milo, feeling quite stupid. Well, continued the Watchdog impatiently, since you got here by not thinking, it seems reasonable to expect that, in order to get out, you must start thinking. And with that, he hopped into the car. Do you mind if I get in? I love automobile rides. Milo began to think as hard as he could, which was very difficult since he wasn't used to it. He thought of birds that swim and fish that fly. Think about that for a second. Birds that swim and fish that fly. He thought of yesterday's lunch and tomorrow's dinner. He thought of words that begin with J and numbers that end in 3. And, as he thought, the wheels began to turn. We're moving! We're moving! He shouted happily. Keep thinking! Scolded the Watchdog. The little car started to go faster and faster as Milo's brain whirled with activity, and down the road they went. In a few moments, they were out of the Doldrums and back on the main highway. All the colors had returned to their original brightness, and as they raced along the road, Milo continued to think of all sorts of things. of the many detours and wrong turns that were so easy to take, of how fine it was to be moving along, and, most of all, of how much could be accomplished with just a little thought. And the dog, his nose in the wind, just sat back, watchfully ticking. And that concludes Chapter 2. So I hope you go back, make sure that you understand the idioms we talked about and all the vocabulary words we talked about, and I will see you tomorrow for Chapter 3. Peace out.